Hey there, everyone. I hope you're having a good afternoon. My name is Jen Walker Wall. I'm the founder of Work Wonders Careers, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about using milestones as part of your job search process. And I am very excited to chat about that today. If we haven't met before, I am thrilled that you're here. Thank you for joining us. Feel free to say hello in the chat and let me know where you're watching from today. And if you are watching the replay, feel free to add comments and ask questions whenever you're watching, and I will try my best to sort of keep up with whatever conversation might happen here once we're done recording. And if you are a Pep Talk regular, thank you for your trust and for watching today. I am excited to talk about milestones. It might not sound exciting, but I'm here to pitch you on using them. And one of the reasons milestones have been on my mind recently is because I have spent the last few months revising the curriculum that our job search clients and community members use. And we have sort of reorganized everything around key milestones in the job search process. We've had a milestone guide for a while, but we finally kind of took the leap and organized everything based on some selected key milestones for the process. And I'm really excited to kind of be rolling that out later this month. And we've just got a whole bunch of exciting things coming up this month. So if you are familiar with our Uncomplicate Your Job Search workshop, we're doing a live version later this month. We're bringing back Work Wonders & Co., our 3-month community-based program for job seekers. And we are wrapping up our first season of Reimagining Ambition. So it's just like milestone central over here. And so I'm excited to dive into this topic and just help you think about what milestones you should be pursuing, how and why, and why you should be using milestones at all. If you're here and watching live, feel free to say hello in the chat and let me know that you're here. If you have questions, feel free to drop them as we go through. But let's dive in. Let's talk about why milestones. Why is this lady getting on here and just talking about job search milestones in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon? Let me tell you, one of the main concerns that I hear from people who are looking for a new job or starting a job search is that they're overwhelmed. They're not sure sort of which direction to go first. They don't know if they should be getting more clarity or looking at their resume or updating LinkedIn. So there's a little bit of confusion about how to even start engaging the process. And there are a lot of confusing expectations, like how many jobs should you apply for to figure out if your resume is working, or how much clarity is enough. And so I always describe the job search as inherently non-linear. It's always it's always in flux. We could be in the late stages of a round of interviews and still have to kind of start over the next day if that doesn't work out. So it's almost like the job search is inherently unstable. And one of the things we work really hard on is making the process more structured, more clear, more focused, simpler for the folks that we work with in this process. And milestones is one of the ways that we do that. Another thing that sort of happens in this process is that it feels all out of our control, right? It feels like we're waiting to be picked. We need someone to call us back. We are on the back burner, just sort of throwing our hands in the air, hoping someone picks us. And the other thing that I really like about milestones is they give us something to do. They give us a way to exercise agency in this process so that we're not just waiting to be picked, but are active participants in the process, selecting and rejecting opportunities, pursuing them, pausing on them, thinking about them, making decisions. So it's sort of a framework for how to move through this process with as much personal power as you can have in something that's sort of ultimately beyond your control. And so I think milestones are important because they help you to manage your own set of expectations and your own energy in this process. If you are a career changer or a job seeker of any kind looking for any kind of pivot or change, it's not reasonable that you are going to be able to generate interviews in just a few days or even a few weeks. The hiring process takes weeks, right? And so sometimes longer. So it's really important that you sort of like manage your own expectations in this process. Don't assume, you're doing things wrong just because you don't have immediate results. A lot of successful people don't have immediate results. Now, the other reason that I like using milestones in this endeavor with clients, right, and when we're searching kind of along with them, is that we can use them to sort of reverse engineer our success. When you don't know how to start something, there's a lot of options. And my personal preference is actually that my clients just do something. Doing something is usually better than nothing in this process. Like 9 times out of 10, I find that to be true. And it's easier for me as someone who's trying to sort of help shape that action to modify what the client is doing rather than sort of like start from scratch and get them to engage in action. I think taking action is one of the hardest things in the job search process, and partly because we could start anywhere, right? Like I said. So what I really want to encourage you to do is to really sort of use these milestones and benchmarks. I'm going to share a couple with you that we are using with our clients because they help inform our tactics and our action plans. They give us a lot of focus. And the way we use them in our programs and with our clients is that they build on each other. So, yes, you are perhaps working on your resume, but the work that you do there is also going to help you when you're having those conversations with folks in your network or you're having to talk about yourself in an interview. So, they're sort of building on one another as we go. And we don't have to sort of panic about trying to do absolutely everything at once. Hey, Christine, it's good to see you. I hope you're well. The other reason I think milestones are important is like they provide a sense of achievement and an opportunity for celebration in a process where most people think that the only opportunity and achievement worth celebrating is like the very last thing that you get. So we are used to celebrating when we are giving notice and starting a new job or updating our LinkedIn profile with a new role and a new title and a new employer. But we don't have to wait until then. I mean, part of the reason the job search I think can feel like such a slog is because there's only one end post for most people. Like there's one touch point. People are trying to get an offer, right? But if we really break the process down, we can understand that there are lots of strategic wins along the way that are worth at the very least acknowledging, but certainly worth celebrating. Clients who are landing interviews in new fields, clients who haven't updated their resume in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, using it to land an interview. Like those are incredible things. And once we sort of like hit that point, like we know we're moving towards success. And people don't often interpret it that because they're solely focused on that end goal. But we really want to use milestones to help you find the wins along the way so that you can assess what you're doing. If you're using your resume consistently and you're not getting results, like that tells you you may not have a resume that is working for you. Maybe you need to refine the roles you're considering. Like there's something further to explore and address there. And even when you are kind of in that phase of addressing things, like that is still really important work. It's foundational for most of our clients, and it is time well spent in this process. People are often sort of like, when they come to us, applying all over the place. Like we call that the spray and pray approach, or they're emailing themselves a lot of jobs. Like there's not a lot of strategic action. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of like exhaustion. There's a lot of overwhelm. And so I think by using these milestones, we're able to move people forward in a way that doesn't exacerbate, whatever sort of exhaustion people are experiencing. It doesn't become another full-time job, which is often how I hear people describe their job search. I mean, I don't think there's going to be that many hours a week of really substantive job search changing, career changing work that you can do week to week. So I think it helps us manage our expectations, keep it, it gives it some boundaries and constraints so that we can do what we need to do and enjoy our lives in the meantime. So let me give a couple of examples here of milestones. So we're using about 5 in our curriculum. And, I'm sure there's an infinite number of job search milestones here, but I just want to give you a couple that we're working with, a couple of examples out of the ones that we're using. So you can get a sense of like, well, how can I start doing this for myself? The first milestone that we really have people focus on is around clarity, but we don't call it clarity because like what would that look like? Total clarity, a certainty, like what are we supposed to know before we even start? And so we wanted to tell you what we think you need to know before you start. So milestone 1 is about articulating what you want more of, what you want less of, and why certain opportunities are compelling to you or not. So this is about the ability to search for jobs and evaluate them, which is really critical to this process. So for most of our clients, it makes sense to start here. And when people come to me and say, I'm all over the place, I have no idea what I want, they'll feel like they're not in any way, shape, or form ready to actually start something that looks like an application process. But when we ask them to really reflect on, well, what's working in your current job? What's not working? Like, what are you hoping to find if you go somewhere else? We're able to, with just a couple of questions, like collect enough information that's going to allow us to help them assess job postings and come up with questions, concerns, thoughts, fears, like to really articulate and name those so that if they see a job that's compelling, but also potentially worrisome or feels intimidating in some way, like they'll know what sort of information they'll need to collect if they go down the road of interviewing for that job in order to further assess it. And so like why else is this important? Because you need to be able to select, identify, and prioritize roles to pursue. Our clients do not rely on volume. I mean, volume is a piece of it. You can't be just applying haphazardly every few months, unless you are applying with razor precision, which is an option, but it's not one that most of our clients need to pursue. So being able to really choose which roles you are going to definitely apply for, what's on your maybe list, what you're rejecting, like what you're opting out of, I think that's really important to acknowledge here. You need to be able to understand the common threads. So, a lot of times people are looking for a single job title or job function to determine their clarity. But what we really want folks to be identifying is like, what are your skills and qualifications? And how are they being leveraged differently in these roles? Because clients are often drawn to a range of roles. They're often fairly well qualified for that range, looking at 2 or 3 different sort of areas, and we really want them to be clear on sort of what parts of their experience are like most relevant for those jobs. And being able to look at job postings and select ones that they're well qualified for means they have to also have an understanding of how their own experience applies. And people really struggle with that and assume they're unqualified pretty quickly. So that's why I think this part is important here. You want to be able to have questions, and that you can pursue and explore as you go through the process, and you want to make sure you're not applying to everything, that you're not looking for just an eject button. And even if you are feeling like you are looking for an eject button, you're probably more likely to get traction applying for jobs you're qualified for, rather than just like any old thing that you're trying to kind of get out with. So it helps us sort of have boundaries and expectations. So here are some signs that you have unlocked this milestone. You can easily review job postings and identify roles that feel compelling and disregard roles or deprioritize roles that are less compelling. You can share your goals and interests and target roles more confidently with colleagues and friends so that they know what to look out for, and are looking out for you. You're activating other eyeballs in this process. Multi-passionate and generalist people will be able to articulate their interests and skills beyond job titles, which I think can be really important for some of our clients to not get bogged down in sort of like what they think they are in terms of a job title, but more of like what they're capable of doing, the impact they're able to offer, or the unique skills they're able to bring to the table here. And you start developing a list of questions for opportunities so that you don't have to go in an interview and be like, well, what am I supposed to ask? You'll know because you'll have those questions. You're allowed to have an empty space that we'll need to fill up with information for you to really consider the position or the offer, as we go through the process. So, for people who are making a change or who feel really unhappy or disconnected from this work, this approach can really make a big shift because it's putting a lot more power sort of back into your hands. And we want to be taking a little bit of time to paint a picture of what we want so that we can be like really good self advocates so that we can make good decisions for ourselves. And I think it's just really important to kind of start here. And once we start here, then we can move on to what we use as milestone number 2, which is about articulating your relevant and transferable experience for specific roles. So, this is really about being able to read a job posting, which might be more complicated than it sounds, and understand what people need to see from you in your resume or hear from you in conversations or interviews. And I always think that starting with job postings and like doing a lot of writing and documenting about what we want and what we're bringing to the table is really good prep for this. Like we can revise that content into super compelling resumes and cover letters and all of that kind of stuff. So this is what we do when we are working with people on the external facing stuff. So milestone 1 is an internal experience by and large, right? Like you are doing it on your own. It's your behind the scenes, it's your backstage process. But being able to articulate relevant experience is really about that front stage. So this is what people are going to see. And we want to make sure that you get really comfortable knowing how to position yourself as a strong candidate for the roles that you want and you're well qualified for. It's really not enough to show up and say, like, here's everything I've ever done, especially if you've been working for a while. So we really want to get good at understanding what other people want and how we can best position ourselves here. So, milestone number 3 is really actually, let me skip to number 5 here because I'm running out of time. Milestone number 5 is probably one of my favorite milestones. Hey, Katie. Oh, hey, Kathy. Good to see everyone. Um, Milestone number 5 is my favorite because it is one of the things that's hardest for job seekers to do. And a lot of people who come to us imagine themselves sort of like taking the first thing that comes along, even though they're hearing us say like that may or may not be a good idea. They're hoping that the first thing that comes along is a really great fit. And that's why number 5 is so important, because what we're doing is learning to walk away and withdraw and say no, thank you to opportunities that we learn are not going to be the right fit for us. Nobody wants to unlock this milestone, but I think it's really important because it's a muscle. Like we can't just be saying yes to every opportunity that comes our way throughout our career. Being a really good block, of bad opportunities for yourself is like 50% of the work of getting to the good ones, maybe even more. So even though you may think like I don't want to cross this threshold, I don't want to unlock this milestone, this will be a game changer because you will, once you do it, and it's hard. It can be hard. Sometimes you're like, oh, actually, it's pretty easy to walk away from this. But sometimes it's hard. And you have to kind of feel like you have to re-engage the job search process all over again. But this is learning to be such a good advocate for yourself, and it's learning to trust yourself to find something better, or at least feel good about not making a decision that either keeps you with the same problems you have now or worse ones. So I think that this is one of the most transformational milestones that people can go through, because once you have a really good resume, like a lot of our clients do, you are going to be able to generate opportunities. And that doesn't mean you're going to be happy everywhere. It doesn't mean every role is really meant for you. You really want to be an excellent steward of what you are, really pursuing, and certainly what you're accepting and saying yes to. So when you hear me say things like, you can't impress your way to a new job, you can actually, but it's not always the best strategy. Like you want to be a good steward, you want to be a good advocate for yourself, and you don't just want to say yes necessarily to jump ship. You want to say yes to something that's going to really help you make a move that matters. And you can decide what this looks like for you. So this is by no means trying to say, you have to have a certain set of priorities or needs. It's really like, what do you need? Honestly, needing a salary and access to healthcare, like that's valid. But a lot of folks that we work with are in a position to look beyond that as well. So think about that more and less list that we created in milestone one? What is the information you've been gathering about the opportunity? What is, giving you pause? Sometimes people get rushed through the process and just don't feel quite comfortable with the timeline. Sometimes people get a bad vibe. Sometimes people have really negative interview experiences. People are not kind. Sometimes the offer is not where you thought it would be. Like, you are allowed to and encouraged to check in with yourself, see how you feel about everything you've heard and experienced, and say yes if it feels right and walk away if it feels wrong. Like, that is okay. It's a very exciting milestone for me to watch because I know it's a really hard one, for people to kind of get through. So if anyone has any questions, this will be a last call for questions. But I do want to thank you for popping in this afternoon. I hope I have sold you on the importance of milestones, especially starting with getting clear on, what target roles, and to not confuse that with certainty or, rigidity even. Like, we really just want to know, like, what would make a better opportunity for you, and what are the things we really kind of like want to look out for and avoid. How can we make it so that the experience and qualifications people are looking for are really evident in our resume, and maybe take away some information that's like way less relevant if we decide that that's the case. And being a really good steward for yourself along the way, right? Being able to gather information and make sense of it and trust yourself to make a decision. These are not easy things to do in a few hours or a few days. Like, these are things that really take weeks and sometimes months to practice, but they do get easier. And when you are able to, move forward with sort of like this toolkit of new skills, I think it makes a really big difference. Oh, hey, Nicole. Christine said, what about the other milestones? Well, there's a lot of other milestones. I mean, I think you take your pick here. We have some other milestones around relationship building. We have some around preparing for the job interview and like speaking about yourself. So like, those are sort of some in the middle here that like I think are really important. But I wouldn't want to dissuade you from thinking about your own milestones. So for example, we have a lot of clients in the last couple of years who have, pursued their project management certification, like their PMP. And you'll notice that on a lot of project manager jobs, like it'll say PMP required, PMP certification preferred. And so a milestone for a lot of those folks is like completing that and passing the exam. It's a pretty tough exam. And, it'll being able to say that they've done that can sometimes be a real game changer for them. For some people, it's, graduating from school, especially if it's a degree or a credential that's like required in your field, can be really important. Sometimes even just having, sometimes a good milestone for people is just hitting numbers of years of experience that's often required for their target roles. So I'm not here to take ownership or try to explain all possible milestones. But I do think it's helpful to sort of think about, what are the pieces along the way that we can acknowledge, celebrate. Sometimes we just celebrate submitting an initial application. I'm a big fan of that, especially for folks who are like really struggling to put out either strategic material or any material at all. I'm thrilled when they are able to do that. And one of the ways that people sort of feel more comfortable doing that sometimes is um, what we call like a low stakes application. So not a job that's necessarily a 10 out of 10, but something that's more like a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10. So you can sort of do your work of getting better at writing your resume and tailoring it for the job at hand, but without the pressure of like, oh no, what if I don't get the job? Like, you might not care if you get the job or not. Yes, sometimes you don't hear back for weeks. That's right. I always tell people when they're like, I would like a job, in 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm like, well, that's sometimes faster than people hire. And so the numbers that I'll share with you that I think make sense for most of our clients, we focus on helping them get 4 to 8 targeted applications out per month for at least 2 months before we really like make any changes in a substantial way to their approach or to their resume. I think we need a certain amount of applications out there. There needs to be some consistency on your part. And we need to unfortunately give the process a little time. And that's hard. That's out of our hands. And I have been part of searches that lasted for months. I have been, part of searches where we didn't call candidates, for weeks. So it is hard. Um, it is hard. I'll just leave it there, perhaps. All right. Let me know if there's any other questions here, but I do want to thank you all for joining me today. It's always lovely to see some familiar names. I know a lot of you are pretty much well on your way to, to landing some offers yourself. So feel free to let me know if you have any other questions. I do have on the Off the Clock podcast, which is our private podcast. So you have to sign up to get access to that. I do have a 3-part series on job search milestones. So if you are like looking for more direction and thinking through, how should I be thinking about this in more detail? I will post the link in the comments as soon as I wrap up with the actual live portion here. So thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time. I really appreciate your trust, and I am wishing you all the best in your job search. And I hope that these milestones make it a little bit easier for you to manage and make clear what it is you need to do, and also clear what you don't need to do. All right. Awesome. Well, have a really great rest of your week. We'll see you soon.